2013. A mother is at home with her kids and decides to play a game of hide and clap.
First clap!
As she wanders blindfolded around her house, she is unaware that there is something else in the room with her. Something hiding in the wardrobe. Something that wants to play. It had been less than 10 years since filmmaker James Wan had made Saw, a grisly, gruesome twist on the slasher genre that brought blood, guts, and the term torture porn to mainstream horror. But now, Wan was about to swing the pendulum back the other way by following in the footsteps of low-budget, bump-in-the-night movies like Paranormal Activity and making a stripped-back, nostalgic, haunted house movie. The film, set in the 1970s and based on real-life ghost hunters Ed and Lorraine Warren, not only worked as a clever throwback to 70s movies such as Amityville and The Changeling, it also had a ghost train ride feel to it, one that appealed to teenagers who turned up in cinemas in their droves and encouraged the kind of loud, raucous behaviour in cinemas that was made popular by 50s filmmakers such as William Castle, thus bringing the evolution of the ghost story full circle. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of the ghost story and we enter the ever-expanding universe of James Wan's The Conjuring. Welcome back to the Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're joining us for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres across a number of weeks. We are currently in the midst of exploring the evolution of the ghost story, and this is part 17, in which, as the intro suggested, we're going to look at those recent classics, The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 in spoilerific detail. This is your big spoiler warning. We will be talking about those two movies in depth, and we will also be mentioning and including minor spoilers for other James Wan produced movies such as Dead Silence, Insidious, The Nun, and the Annabelle movie. So just be warned, there will be a few minor spoilers littered throughout. Before we get started though, here are a few contact details. Don't forget, you can email us. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter @evolutionpod or on Letterboxd @evolutionpod. You can also find us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. And if you want to get involved in some discussion with other listeners of the podcast, then please do join the Evolution of Horror discussion group. That can be found on Facebook, and it's where you can chat about horror, the podcast, and whatever you like with fellow listeners. So let's get started. It's time to introduce my guest for this week. Very excited to have her back on the podcast. She was first here a few weeks ago discussing The Shining. She's a big fan of James Wan, and she's back to discuss these movies with me in depth. It is my great pleasure to welcome back Louise Blain. Louise, hello.
Hello.
Hello. So thank you for being here, first of all.
Very welcome. I'm excited to be here, talk about horrors.
Now, you have been on the podcast before. You've told us a little bit about yourself. We discussed The Shining, which was great fun to do. Just remind us, we're hurtling towards the end of our series on ghosts now. These are some of the most recent classic haunted house movies that we've got. What is your kind of take on the whole haunted house, supernatural horror genre in general?
Well, I'm a massive fan of supernatural films.
Yeah.
I think they're the kind that you do find much more traditional. The traditional fear sort of escaping from, obviously, we looked at slashers, but I think there's something about sitting down to a proper ghost, a proper scary film. It's the imagination of, it's the thinking about what's in the dark. And I think what we're going to cover today, James Wan is especially special at, is what is hiding in the dark.
Yes.
And what will you find there, what you find when you're in bed and tucked up, and why do you tuck your feet under the quilt at the end.
Yes.
It's all those things. So I love scary stories of all types, but especially terrifying ghost stories, the ones that bother you.
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
You go to sleep.
They do bother you. I think that's the thing, isn't it? That's the difference, because everyone so far I've talked about ghost movies with have said these are properly scary. Like, it's actually, this is the scary end of horror, isn't it? Really, it gets under your skin.
It runs on base fear.
Yeah.
I think darkness is something that we all have to experience, every night, and it's something that the imaginative among us, which most horror fans will say, oh, I love thinking about that at night.
Yeah.
will simultaneously love and hate it, because they'll remember everything they've seen all day.
Yeah.
And suddenly it becomes very real when you're very alone.
Oh my God, yeah. So predominantly what we're going to talk about is The Conjuring, obviously James Wan's movie. But just before we get into that, just because obviously he was, by the time The Conjuring came out in sort of 2013, he was quite a well-known name by this point. I think his first sort of major release that he directed was Saw, which obviously is so other end of the spectrum, really. And he kind of launched this whole wave of those kind of violent torture porny type movies, really. Yeah. But then he kind of changed the way of things again, really, when he did movies like Insidious. So he's definitely like a kind of interesting director. I mean, did you watch sort of Saw and Insidious and those movies before you saw The Conjuring?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I watched Saw, which I love, and I still kind of have a lot of respect for the following 6 movies for even managing to keep a narrative through. And I haven't managed to see Jigsaw yet, but I will, because I feel a lot of attachment to, I know there's, after the first one there was a lot of discussion of torture porn, which I think I've become more sensitive to as I've got older.
Totally happens.
I think when I watched Saw, I felt it was all really cool.
Yeah.
Now I feel like the narrative involved in a man lying there the whole time, that's the coolest thing of Saw for me.
Absolutely.
What might not have always been, but it is now.
I think that's what makes the first one so brilliant for me compared to the sequels.
Absolutely.
Because it wasn't really as fussed about the gore and torture as it was the twists and that kind of simple setup, wasn't it?
And you can feel a bit of Wan when you watch Saw again, because the bit where he's looking around his house with the camera.
Yes.
And it's those
That's
moments,
pure James
things
Wan.
in the dark.
Yes.
And it's that noise, it's that flash.
Someone there?
And all of those things, he's evolved into these now much more classical horror. But what I do really like is, and I was very, very fortunate in that I got to interview him very briefly about The Conjuring too. And I only got one of those 6-minute sessions, which I think I have so much to ask you.
Yeah.
But I love Dead Silence.
Yeah, it's really underrated.
It's so trashy, but it's also wonderfully old school. It actually teases so much of The Conjuring.
There's an old ghost story around here about a woman named Mary Shaw.
The ventriloquist who lost her voice. Back when I was a little boy went missing.
There was only ever one suspect, Mary Shaw.
You've got ventriloquist dummies.
Yeah.
You've got walls of them in old houses. You've got even kind of twists of, you have this wonderful optical illusion of a door that's hidden behind a wall that's stripy, and they go behind it, and it's all this little unfolding moments of Wan magic, which I think has only really come into play with something like The Conjuring and Insidious and all of these things. So I think we can watch a nice evolution of his scares.
Yeah, you absolutely can. Yeah, and that's true. I mean, he clearly has a real fear of dolls, doesn't he? Because actually, I forgot that obviously Saw has that little dummy, and then The Conjuring at the beginning has the whole Annabelle setup as well.
And they're both called Billy. So there's Billy the ventriloquist doll, and obviously Billy on Saw as well.
Yeah.
So there's a running theme of these inanimate objects that he gives horrible life to.
Yeah, I think people are already starting to have theories that, like, what if all of his movies are set in the same universe in some way? Including Insidious.
One.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, which would be brilliant. He's definitely kind of like our he's our closest thing, I think, to a kind of horror auteur that we've got of this generation. He's our John Carpenter or Wes Craven or something like that, in a way, in that he has such a kind of style and he's such a trendsetter as well. I mean, if you look at other movies that have come out recently, like It just feels pure kind of James Wan.
It's absolutely.
Yeah.
It feels like that in between. I felt like that with It, where we'd have the conversation between the children, we'd have those wonderful relationships that it manages to deliver. But also in those scare sections, there are some moments that are so Wan that you're just like, I'm watching a Wan movie interspersed with a Stand By Me.
Yes,
exactly,
exactly.
So it's like,
So
I understand what I'm watching here, and it's the combination of everything, and I love it. So
It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
And you're right, I mean, after Saw, there was Dead Silence, which kind of veered slightly more into that kind of ghost story territory, even though it still had a bit of gruesomeness. It was a kind of slow transition. And then he did Insidious, which is, of course, a kind of a real out-and-out ghost movie, a sort of haunted house film, but quite a modern twist on it. It's very much set in the modern day. It's very glossy. It's got this kind of weird sort of fantasy element in it towards the end, where we go into sort of other mystical realms, and you've got red demons that look like Darth Maul, and it's a lot more kind of showing you monsters left, right and centre. And then he goes one step further, makes it even more old-fashioned, and we end up with the really pure, nostalgic, stripped-back haunted house movie that is The Conjuring.
What are you guys?
Well, we've been called ghost hunters, paranormal researchers.
But we prefer to be known simply as Ed and Lorraine Warren.
There's someone here that would like to talk to you.
There's something horrible happening in my house.
The Conjuring's interesting in the fact that it gets to put that lovely based on a true story at the start. So it's Ed and Lorraine Warren, parapsychologist, demonologist sort of researchers who travel around and supposedly exorcise demons from unsuspecting families. And the nice thing is he's got this existing backlog, so to speak, of their cases. So this particular case is the Perron family. They're a couple with five daughters who move into a house and things don't go as you'd like to. There are bumps. There are literal bumps in the night. And there are horrible smells, which I think is actually really touchingly done. Quite early on, she says, stop farting. What are you doing? This smells terrible. And you're suddenly like, I know that's sulfur. I know that just because it's a nice little touch of that. And I think as things go from bad to worse, the Warrens obviously come in, played by Lorraine as Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson as Ed Warren, who I think incidentally are lovely, very restrained performances almost from them sometimes. Like I admired their performances in that because they make it far more of a period piece. They make it her in her high collars and her frilly collars and her very specific bag over the arm. I think together they make a much more period piece than you would expect. So when the classical horror starts to sort of ramp up and the strings go, you are all the more involved because of the sort of, you've already placed it in your mind. It's a ghost story. It's set in a place. And you're going there with them. So as a setup, it's practically perfect because he can just keep doing it with all of their cases or just make up new ones.
It is the perfect setup, isn't it? It's that I bet the studios, I don't think this one is Blumhouse actually, but I think obviously a lot of his other movies were Blumhouse, but they must have a field day with that idea where it's like, okay, well, we've got all of these other cases. These films probably are fairly cheaply done.
Absolutely.
And which we'll go into later, make a shit ton of money, especially The Conjuring. So, perfect kind of setup, really. What was do you remember the first time you ever watched The Conjuring?
I do, because it was just, as you said before, when you talk about, we talked about watching things on your own. Now, the first time I did watch it on my own, I didn't see it in the cinema. Normally, I'd be the first to see them in the cinema, but I had missed it. And I sat on my own in my flat where I was living in the west of Scotland on a cold, windy, dark night.
Perfect experience.
And I sat and watched it on my own. And the hilarious thing was, halfway through, nobody uses a landline anymore, right? Everyone has one, but nobody uses it. So I had completely forgotten that I bought, it's ridiculous, I can't believe I'm admitting this here. I bought a landline phone that was digital, but it looked like one of the old school ones. One with
they're very popular.
So it was wireless.
Yes.
But you expect one of those curly wires, and you have to do the thing to do it.
Yes.
I used it very briefly. I don't think it had ever rung.
No.
The only time it ever rang was halfway through The Conjuring. And that's when it did its perfectly digital recreation of an old school phone.
Oh my God.
And I think I dropped everything. I think there was probably tea everywhere. I think I'd been sitting maybe watching my PlayStation, my DualShock was on my chest. Everything went flying. It's like, that's just my actual phone that I just haven't bothered to change the ringtone for. So it was...
My God. Who was it that called you?
I think it was my mum.
Okay, all right,
I can't get through to your mobile. It's like, don't just don't.
Yeah,
No.
I was going to say, it's classic. It's always parents or grandparents or somebody like that would call a landline. No one else.
Thankfully, it was a person,
Yes.
and not just a noise of just before one of those call centers answers, and you'd be like, "Oh no, no, don't start breathing."
Yeah, that's good. Something very similar to that happened to me when I watched The Ring, which was an equally kind of scary film. To suddenly hear the phone ring, during that, it's always quite a creepy thing. So by the sounds of it, the movie kind of got under your skin.
It definitely got me, and I think by watching it in that kind of location and on my own, snuggled up, I think it's the perfect time for a ghost story. It's like, there's one of those Sunday nights where you sit down with a cup of tea and you want a ghost story. I think it pressed all my buttons for horror. It was I loved the slow burn nature of it, because before it goes completely, a couple of times it goes completely batshit.
Yes.
But there are moments of it that are really slow. It takes its time. It's not going to rush you.
No.
And I think, although it drips in all the things that scare one, which is obviously we get the introduction of Annabelle.
Yes.
And we get, things behind doors, we get slamming doors, we get creaking doors, we get all of that. I think it delivers this slow burn nature where things are going to go really wrong.
Yeah.
And you aren't sure how.
Yeah, because actually it's not a... it's not a short film for a horror film, actually.
Not at all.
It's nearly 2 hours long, isn't it? And Conjuring 2 is over 2 hours as well.
We'll get onto that in a minute,
yeah, absolutely. It is a slow burn. And actually, I think I'm torn on this film. I think there's a kind of cynical part of me that looks at these films and goes, well, he's just wholesale taking other things from other movies. But he does do them really well, and I can't deny that it gets me. Like, I watch it and it gets me. It scares me. It makes me jump. It gets under my skin. So he's doing something right. He's doing something well. That's the thing.
I think he's playing. I have a lot of respect, especially for The Conjuring 1.
Yes.
We'll talk about The Conjuring 2 later.
Yes.
But in The Conjuring 1, it manages to do a thing where it combines so many things, and it effortlessly sets up this universe, which we'll also talk about probably at length.
Yeah.
But I think there's something, although it's taking everything from where we've taken it before, we've seen it all before, we haven't seen it quite like this.
No.
And I love his camera angles. Like, he's ridiculous.
Yes.
Sometimes he loves his camera, and that was one thing that when I spoke to him, the fact that all his films, everyone looks like they live in a warehouse.
Yes.
Because the furniture is tiny.
Yes.
The furniture is tiny. Everything is this massive expanse. It
Yes.
take you 15 minutes to get down the hall. They're
Yes.
that long. And I think he plays with those where you are literally in a haunted house. You know they've moved into a haunted house. The walls are cracked and peeling, and it might be that you've put a picture up, but it's not quite home.
Yeah.
And all of these things I think he plays with enough to feel fresh and to feel like something I always want to see more of.
Yeah.
I think it's a formula. It's definitely a formula.
Yeah.
But it's a formula I like.
Yeah.
I love J.K. Rowling books. Every year, except the last year, Harry went to school and had to face He Who Must Not Be Named.
Yes.
And, a lot of her naming and all these other things she took from other places.
Yeah.
And I think rather than say one's just replicating things we've seen before, he's putting the ingredients in the mix, but he's making something new and something interesting and something that we care about enough that it doesn't feel like a sequel factory anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're right, because all horror films to an extent have that kind of formulaic nature to them. Look at every slasher, or whatever. I think it's something to do with previous ghost stories we've talked about, like The Orphanage, for example, or The Changeling. There's something more. There's something so kind of uncanny that kind of stays with you afterwards. Yeah. Whereas I think the argument that a lot of people make against James Wan's movies, or especially the Conjuring, is that okay, you kind of jump out your seat and scream, and then it's kind of over and you've kind of forgotten all about it. It's like a kind of throwaway, 90-minute experience, which that's nothing to be sniffed at, really. Yeah. But
it's what people pay a lot for if they go to Disneyland.
Yes,
like if you go to Universal Studios, you pay to be entertained in 3-minute bursts or very short rides where you queue up. And he is, you could say he's a master of a ghost train in that way. You go on your ride, you chug up the slow burn start, and then he drops you at the top and you keep riding down to the bottom. And that is exactly,
it's a really, really well executed, well crafted ghost train ride. Yeah. That's what it feels like. And it's funny because we're going back to, it kind of feels like we've gone full circle, because at the beginning of this series of ghost stories, we talked about the kind of 1950s movies by people like William Castle, who did like House on Haunted Hill and 13 Ghosts. And he was all about showing them in a cinema with all these gimmicks where he'd have electrocuted seats and skeletons coming across, and it feels like that's what James Wan, if he could, that's what he'd have in cinemas almost.
Well, that's what It did. When they released, they actually had you can go to the special Pennywise screening. It's like, that is very Castle, and I have no interest in that
Yeah.
because that's too much. That becomes
yeah.
too much. And I think the responses of people to movies like this are extreme because you're in one place, you're pointed in one direction, and you have someone that is the master of making you jump out of your seat.
Yeah.
And if you're particularly sensitive to that, even on the second or third viewing, it's an experience.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, before we get into, I've got a few key moments in that film that absolutely, like, I forgot about. And when I rewatched the film last night, I was thinking, fuck me, this is scary. I mean, really well done. But yeah, like, let's just talk briefly about the characters. I mean, Vera and Patrick as the Warrens. I mean, these two were two real life people. Again, something I don't think I knew when I first watched the first Conjuring, that they were actually this couple that went and kind of investigated ghosts and performed exorcisms and really divided, America, and that some people really, really believed in them. A lot of people thought they were kind of rip-off artists and everything, but they're interesting characters. And I think, like, James Wan, he doesn't quite reveal much. Like, you're still left with not knowing too much about them, are you, really, other than what they do?
Yeah, I think there's something... You do see them in a family situation,
Yes.
which I quite like. I like the
did.
fact that they have a daughter, and there's this sort of connection with the daughter, and I love the fact that they have a daughter, but also this museum of curiosities, which I've since found is a thing that you
really
can visit.
existed, yeah.
That you can... No, now. You can visit it now.
Oh my God, amazing.
You can actually visit, and it's got the Raggedy Ann doll that is Annabelle, because obviously Annabelle is a much nicer looking doll in real life, which is even worse, actually. I'd rather she looked demonic with that little bit down her eye.
Yes.
But I think I like the fact that they're real. I love the fact also that he embraces the fact that the pictures at the end, he always puts the comparison up, so you're actually got the actor's name going over the real life person.
Yeah.
And regardless of what the real story is, the fact that there's even a fragment of truth behind it, that's the bit that sort of that gets you as well.
It's great. It just makes you so much more curious, I think, to find out where it's going to go. And they do. You were perfectly right. Like, they are so understated, aren't they? Their performances. They're very kind of, compared to some of the craziness that goes on with the family and inside that house. Those two kind of, I suppose, keep everything grounded, and they go into throughout this whole series. I imagine.
And the thing is, it's also in the less enjoyable Conjuring 2, potentially because you see more of them,
yes,
that feels too much.
Yes.
I think it's a balance in the first Conjuring where you're like, I know who these people are, I know where they live, I know what they do, but there's a balance to it of these two families.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the second one, it gets a bit smudgy and a bit messy amongst all the other messy things, but I think the first keeps this great balance of them, and you know their relationship together, and they are nice people. I love the fact that he fixes the car of the family. Like, it's the little moments of that which you might not find anywhere else.
Yeah.
When we're going... I was actually thinking about the fact that the heroes and the people that we centre on in a lot of the movies we watch now are families.
Yes.
We're out of the very pretty teenager section.
Yes.
And even the children, some of them, the little girls, they're not picture-perfect Hollywood children.
No.
They have faces that have character and detail. And I think... what we were going to talk about was the fact that the children, although there are so many of them, there are a lot of children who some sort of fade into the background, others less so. They are like people. They genuinely are like children that look like they're growing up and look like they're kind of awkward to stand together. And I like that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think I could have done with maybe a couple less of them. And I'm sure, obviously, that's the true story, and that's how many there were. Really, we only focus on about 2 or 3 of them, don't we?
Yeah.
But, yeah, you're right. They feel like a natural family. That scene when they're all around the kitchen, it's kind of havoc around the kitchen. It feels totally real.
It feels sweet as well.
Yeah.
There's a genuine... I think Juan manages to do that quite well, and he does it in Insidious as well. Where you've got people moving into the house and you've got a montage. So it's a weird moment. They have a montage of them putting up all the cameras to take the pictures. So it manages to have sweetness and be funny, but also you know that when it gets dark, shit's going to go down, and you're not going to like it.
What I loved Insidious actually, but with this and The Conjuring and Insidious, I kind of, with both of them, I loved the first hour especially. Like you say, he's so good at laying that groundwork and building that suspense, and not even showing us anything yet, just teasing us. And I feel like I got a bit let down with Insidious when you actually see what goes on in the last act, but everything up until that is absolutely genius.
Yeah.
The baby monitors and the noises and the shadows and all that kind of thing.
The music and the tiptoe through it, and you're just like, oh no.
Yeah, so well done, absolutely brilliant. And you're right, like they create real families, which is really nice. We're introduced to all these characters, quite a lot of characters, really, actually, all at once, because we get the Warrens, we get this whole story with Annabelle the doll, and that's kind of not really. It kind of comes back towards the end of the film, but it's sort of an isolated thing, isn't it?
It is, and it's probably. Did they know then that they were going to do a Conjuring universe?
Well, I can't imagine they'd have banked on the fact that film would have done as well as it did.
I think people know scary dolls are scary dolls.
Yeah.
And James Wan likes scary dolls.
Yes.
And I think that's a really interesting way of introducing them as well, because they introduced it as, this is us, we're going around universities or lecture theatres, and it was almost a really neat way of saying, here's who we are, here's what we do, and, putting in at the same time the fact that there's a really scary doll that's possessed by a demon. So it was a nice, much slicker, I was kind of thinking about it as the DC extended universe is going down the tubes.
Oh God!
And if you think about how they managed to force in Aquaman and everyone else into Batman versus Superman, where he literally found a USB stick.
Yeah.
And then you look at The Conjuring.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're like, you introduced an entire world of movies almost effortlessly.
Yeah.
Sure, the cynical among us would go, oh, well, that's a thing.
Yeah.
And now the progression of that, you go, oh, there's a creepy nun. Where's that going to end up? But even then, it still feels like a far more natural seeding.
It does.
And I'm much more excited about an extended Conjuring universe than I am at all at DC.
Yes.
There's much more heart and much more intrigue in spades. And I don't mind that so much that they're going, here, have this demon, have this. I mean, in essence, they have that whole museum.
That's what it is, isn't it? It's that old-fashioned thing. I think it's the Friday the 13th series in the 80s that was all about a shop of weird antiques, and each episode would focus, and it was a different story on a different thing. And it's essentially that, isn't it? It's like they've got this whole museum room of evidence, and it's like, I guess, they have all that to play with for a whole series.
Focus on a different one each time, and it's really intriguing because you go,
really
I know that'll happen, or I know this will happen. I wonder how this ties in here. So I think it's smart, as well as smart financially.
Yes, exactly.
I think it's smart on another level.
I think you're right. Yeah. And also, that opening scene, even though it does feel separate, I think it's a good, like you say, I think it's a good introduction to the Warrens, really, because it's all part of a lecture, a story they're telling at university, and also it's just structurally, I suppose, it's a nice kind of scary opening before we then go into a very slow hour-long build-up, really, before we then get another big jump scare or monster or ghost or whatever. So it kind of works on that sort of very base level as well, in a way, doesn't it?
I think Wan's a storyteller. I think he is a very good storyteller, and I think sometimes he might get a bit caught up in his dark, quite loud.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think he always wants to deliver. You don't get horror without humanity, do you? So you need to put a bit of you somewhere.
Yes.
And I think that's, talking about the scares that especially get us, the one where she wakes up in the middle of the night and she's sure that there's someone behind the door. And I think...
Yes, that's the scene I was going to mention.
That has happened to us all.
Yeah.
I have to... This is embarrassing. I have to take I have my dressing gowns hanging on the back of my door. And every night I have to take them off because when there's no light, or when there's a little bit of light, that's a thing standing there. So every day, put them back up and I take them back down because I know what my wanified imagination could put that into. But she's alone, her sister's asleep, everything's very quiet, and there is someone behind the door.
It's just, that is such a brilliantly played scene, isn't it? And the little girl plays it so well.
Nancy, what are you doing? Do you see it? There's someone behind the door. What? There's someone standing over there. I don't see anyone. It's looking right at us.
I'm just so glad that he didn't show us at that point anything.
No, nothing. There was a slamming door and that was it.
I'm so glad that, that moment when the sister walks all the way over there and and you just think, oh, please. And I was just, please don't let some demonic thing suddenly grab her. And I'm so glad it didn't, because it was just so much. It just built and built and built and built. Yeah, up until that door slam.
I think with I also like that one isn't afraid to show the demonic things when it's time.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
even if they look a bit theatrical and weird, like I can't take them all entirely seriously. I don't look at Bathsheba and go, you're terrifying. Everything leading up to it was terrifying.
Yes.
In fact, one other particularly terrifying bit, and it's in all the ads, is the clapping.
Yes, that's a brilliant setup.
It's the hands.
Yes.
When they come out of the wardrobe, because you don't just hear them.
Yes.
That's when you see them just out the corner of your eye, and you know she's blindfolded. So every level is bad.
Yeah.
You know what's there. She doesn't know what's there. She thinks it's her daughter that's there.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was terrifying because that's not who you think it is, and I don't want to go in that wardrobe.
Yes, it's really that those moments are done so well, really, really well. What do you think then of the whole? You mentioned this already. The whole like quiet bang thing, I suppose. And people like Mark Kermode actually have talked a lot about this, about why he doesn't like these films, in that they are just a series of kind of very, very slow, long, quiet build-ups, followed by a huge, loud jump scare noise, which James Wan is definitely kind of
he is
the
guilty.
master of.
He is, but the fact that he's the master of it, I think takes. I watched the Annabelle movie, which I've actually watched twice now. The first time I really didn't like it. The second time I liked it a little more.
Yeah.
But there are films that do that badly.
Yes.
I think there's a way of doing that really badly. Of just being like, I know what you're doing. You're playing me. It's going to be someone coming from the right of the screen and going to the left.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this to me? I've seen this before.
Yeah.
But I think Wan takes it to another level, and I can completely understand, because Kermode I love all his views on horror films, and the fact that I think I've learned from him. I've listened to this podcast for years, just listening. Oh, he really likes scary things, and no other critic does, and this is amazing.
Absolutely.
And I think a slightly younger approach to those, I am more forgiving of, because I enjoy the way they're done. I enjoy waiting for the beat to happen, because if you do it right, you never quite get it. You know something's going to happen, and then it does, or it either doesn't, and it does it on the next beat. And you're just like, how didn't that get me? Why did that get me? And I think it's the fun of playing that game. And I watched Annabelle Creation this year, and that genuinely frightened me.
See, I haven't seen this. Is it good?
Yes.
Yeah.
I watched that fully expecting a mediocre film, but at the same time, it's David F. Sandberg. He made Lights Out.
And that was brilliantly done. Yeah.
And that short to me is perfect.
Amazing.
But Annabelle Creation really, really scared me. Great. And of all of them, I didn't expect it to, and I didn't expect to be as squirmy in the cinema as I was. Like, properly, oh no, people were screaming in the cinema, which I didn't really expect. It's really scary.
Okay, good. I'll check that one out. Yeah, because I was a bit disappointed by the first Annabelle, although maybe I should give it a rewatch. But
on the rewatch, it's rewatch it and then watch Creation, and together they make far more of a whole than you expect.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you're right, like, lots of directors try this, and it's an easy thing in theory to achieve, a character, walking slowly backwards into something, and then something comes from a different direction, or whatever it might be, But he does do it well, I think. That's the thing.
We can agree that.
He does it better than the average. And, they do get you. They do make you jump. The hand clapping in the basement as well, in the cellar, that got me as well. Yeah, there were a few great moments. Where it lost me a bit, even second time around, is the second half of that movie, when we're at the point where it's so overwrought, and it's her hair as she's being dragged back and forth up and down the room, and fights and possessions and exorcisms.
It's one exorcism.
Everything at you.
It's one exorcism too many. And I think I felt that when I first watched it, going, I have watched to a point. I did not need an exorcism to finish this movie.
No.
But I also have a bit of respect for the fact it's like, you've done all this and now you're, Christ compelling. You're holding out that cross and everything is shaking. What I didn't understand was he was running around upstairs trying to find the little girl.
Yeah.
Interspersed with the exorcism scenes. And when it was in the house, you couldn't hear a thing. But if you were in the basement, the whole place was rumbling. And you're going, this isn't quite right. Are you rumbling around the same house? I don't understand.
Yeah.
But of all the things to pick at, that felt like a weird one. But I even as an exorcism goes, there's a nice moment where it's completely silent and the chair starts to wobble and her feet start to wobble and she starts to float. And it's little moments in that where I still find that's cool.
Yeah.
But it was one exorcism too many. Even in my book, it was just I didn't need it to go in that direction.
No, it was really like, you watch it again and you're like, wow, there's, like you said, they've got killer dolls aspects of it, they've got, ghosts, they've got demons, they've got exorcisms. He is making like the ultimate supernatural horror movie really with this, isn't he?
As if he's never going to make another one.
Yes.
It's like, well, they're never going to let me make an exorcism movie, so I'll put it at the end of this.
And also it's like, don't blow your wad too early, because you've got like 10 Conjuring movies now to make.
Yeah, you have a lot of work to do. You could have done the floating chair 3 movies in. That would have been fine. I didn't need it here. The house was scary enough.
Absolutely. It was so scary, and it's so well done enough, just that idea of, stop touching my feet or whatever in bed, and it's someone else. And again, all those kind of things you know from old movies, but at the same time it's just like, it's a trick that will never grow old in a way. It's perfect. So I mean, the movie obviously, when it came out, just was this sensation really, and I think it kind of marked the end in a way of the kind of really gory torture porny movies, which funnily enough James Wan kind of started. But it kind of put an end to that, I think, where I think studios obviously realised that if we make PG-13 horror movies, we're going to get a lot more audiences, we're going to get more money, and it just seemed to be suddenly the pendulum swung the other way. People wanted these movies now, didn't they?
I think there's kind of the lack of gore in The Conjuring is almost, it feels great. Even when there's a horrible bit where you obviously have to check, does the dog die? Because the dog does die.
Yes.
But even when they go outside, they zoom back from that, and you're like, you don't see anything, you don't see any blood, there's none of that, and any kind of gore or interaction is almost theatrical gore.
Yes.
He's very theatrical. He's got his strings, and he's, it's very, everything is very grand, and I think gore takes away from that. There's the sort of romantic idea of the old school ghost story does not have buckets of blood. No. Like it doesn't have it. And I think Dead Silence kind of walked that way, because it kind of was a bit gross, because people were having their tongues ripped out, and that was the premise of it. So I think that was the half classical, half Saw, and it was probably the turning point for it, because people were having, tongues ripped out. And then there was also, maybe if people haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil any kind of twist, but there's a pretty disgusting point near the end. It's pretty vile, but amazing, and definitely worth the watch for it. But I think he's looked at that, tried out a lot of things, mastered it, and then come to The Conjuring, and suddenly everyone's hungry for it because it's different, and it doesn't feel like what we've had before, and it's not torture porn, and it's not a slasher. It's what everyone understands is things are scary, things go bump.
Yeah, absolutely. And clearly everyone wanted it. Everyone went to see it. It was this huge sensation. Weirdly, the thing that a lot of people talked about, and that a lot of articles were getting written about, is the cinemas were getting filled with young people and misbehaving young people. People screaming, shouting, laughing, absolute like terrible kind of cinema etiquette going on around the world, which is really interesting, isn't it? It's that it's just attracted that type of an audience or something.
But I think there's a fun audience in that. Again, that's an amusement park audience.
It's the ghost train thing, isn't it?
And also there's something quite enjoyable about going to a cinema and everyone having the same collective psyche.
Yes.
If you all go for that, that's fine. Maybe it's not great for the people who maybe they bought the wrong ticket for the wrong thing. Like my gran, who accidentally bought a ticket for Final Destination.
Brilliant.
And watched it with her friend.
Brilliant.
But I think there's a sense of fun in going to see these films.
Yeah.
And if everyone is in the same boat, it's great.
Absolutely.
I saw Paranormal Activity.
And that's kind of actually the movie that started that kind of etiquette, I think.
But I think no one expected Paranormal Activity to be as scary. I remember watching it on I think it was release day. It came out, and it was in a packed Glasgow cinema, and it got so busy that people were sitting away from their friends because they were coming in and there wasn't enough seats. And I had a big Glasgow guy next to me. Like, he was quite a big chap. He was not going to, you would not, want to meet him in an alleyway on a dark night. But closer to the end of the film, he had, and I can't do it here, he had his thumbs in his ears, and his hands, his fingers were over his eyes.
Amazing.
And I turned to him, I was like, "Are you all right?" And he turned to me and he's like, "I'm pure fear, pal." And he was a big guy, and he was terrified. He was really scared because everyone in the cinema was equally scared.
Yeah.
So it was this building I'm sure psychologists would have an absolute field day with a sort of infectious fear. And the way that the response is the rest of the cinema.
Yeah.
Because if someone, like, it's the thing, if you're watching a horror film and someone laughs and you're not feeling like laughing, and then other people begin to go, oh, is it a bit silly? Because you know there's that line between scary and silly, and Juan walks that quite often.
Yes.
And I think if it spills one way, everyone's afraid, and if it spills the other, then it might ruin what you might find is a terrifying experience for you that someone guffawed at and ruined everyone else's. So
absolutely,
it's very personal. When it works together, it's good.
Yeah, it's perfect, isn't it? Yeah, and you're right. And there is that kind of laughter that you get in these movies, but it's kind of nervous laughter. You know, when you're watching Paranormal Activity and you're just watching for 5 minutes a couple sleeping and nothing happening, suddenly you hear like titters of laughter because everyone's like, what the fuck are we watching? What's going to happen? You know, and
everyone's just watching one part of the screen. I loved that movie. That's definitely one of the scariest things for me, is watching each part. Like, is the door going to move?
Perfect.
And where are the footsteps? I think when literally you saw the footsteps come in after a agonising 4 minutes of nothing, anything would have killed you at that point.
Exactly.
You know, if the door had slammed, everyone would have jumped. But the fact it was feet and nothing else had been seen, I think all of these things.
Yes.
So I think the way the audiences responded to The Conjuring was almost a natural progression.
Absolutely.
Of where we had got to up to this point, and be afraid.
Yeah, you're right. And like you say, it's theatrical as well. It's a theatrical thing, you know. It adds to that theatricality of it. Even the title sequence is so extreme and theatrical, isn't it? Yeah, the strings, the big text that kind of rolls up, you know, everything he's going for is
we are not in Subtleville.
No.
Population Subtleville 0.
And so I guess, you know, the lack of subtlety clearly worked, because the movie did so well. As we mentioned, it made so much money. It grossed $137 million domestically and over $300 million worldwide. It was an absolutely huge hit, especially considering what a small budget movie it was. So of course, you know, this whole idea was like a producer's wet dream anyway, in that it kind of had the potential to spark an entire franchise, and that's what happened. So soon after that, we got Annabelle, the spin-off about Annabelle the doll, and then we got The Conjuring 2. And The Conjuring 2, I mean, any subtlety that The Conjuring 1 may have had has completely gone by The Conjuring 2. It's so long, and it feels like about 4 movies in one. You've got the story of the Enfield haunting, predominantly set in London, about a haunted house. Then you've got also the story of the Amityville haunting, literally the Amityville horror is kind of squished into the opening scene. You've also got a random other thread about a demonic nun, which of course is setting up an upcoming spin-off movie. And there's another kind of creepy monster demon thing at some point that pops up called The Crooked Man. So you've got basically the material for 4 different movies all crammed into one. And again, it's like James Wan is trying to make the only movie he'll ever make with this. But of course he knows that's not the case by this point, which makes it even more baffling. But anyway, let's get into it. Let's briefly discuss James Wan's The Conjuring 2.
They're calling it England's Amityville. There is a family that desperately needs our help.
After everything we've seen, there isn't much that rattles either of us anymore. But this one still haunts me. Does it feel like the voice is coming from inside you?
More like it's coming from behind me. Like I'm being used.
Janet, are you all right?
Stop calling me
Janet. She's such a good girl. What's it wrong with her?
An oppressing spirit will try to force you to commit the ultimate sin.
And what's that?
Murder, suicide, or both.
Well, see, I'd already watched the Enfield haunting.
It's a film already.
Yeah, it was, and it was a 2-parter with Timothy Spall that had been on, and I'd watched it quite recently. And I think in the UK, anyway, we all know of this haunting. We've seen the pictures of the 2 girls jumping or floating, depending on what you think. I do think The Conjuring 2 is too much. The Conjuring too much is the case. I remember seeing it and getting out and thinking, that is 2.5 hours of horror movie and only an hour of it worked.
Yeah.
And I think it's an over-egged thing. Yes, I like the Warrens. No, I don't need a sing-along. Yes, I like the idea of something with really big legs that can go upstairs. no, I don't like the CGI of that turning it from a dog.
I know, CGI. There was no need for CGI.
None.
Yeah.
And he's never done it. And he should never do it again.
No.
It was one monster too many.
He was like, he sort of went, the Babadook, let's get something a bit like that in there or something.
It was almost like some studio executive went, people are really scared of the Slender Man. Put him in.
the Slender Man, yes,
and it's
exactly.
like, but why did you have to?
Yes.
Because, and you can see where they're inserted as well. You know, the children having that weird toy about the man, and you're just like, I don't need you, because there are moments of scary in The Conjuring 2.
Yeah.
There are the same moments, and incidentally, the architecture, I think that's one thing that really irritates British people, is they look at that, and from the outside, it looks like an English council house, and on the inside, it's like some kind of horror TARDIS.
Yes.
It's like the Amityville house, and that's actually what I asked him about. I was like, so, you really have a look for your films? And he said, well, I need space for my cameras, because I do really interesting things with my cameras. And I said, well, that is a fair point.
Yeah.
But your houses are cavernous.
Yes.
And I think
it's true.
I think a lot of people in the UK kind of scoffed at The Conjuring 2 when she was talking to her mate and they're going into a basement. Who has a basement that you can literally... Even, I think the Americanization of an English council house was just too much. I think there's so much wrong with it in the fact that no one could take it seriously because it was such a wan movie, which doesn't fit into the UK. It just doesn't. It tonally, architecturally, physically doesn't fit.
No,
and,
literally doesn't
you know,
fit.
we just don't have leaky basements with wooden floors that go into big living rooms like that. And it's a shame, because I like a lot of that film. I like maybe an hour of that film.
Yeah, agreed.
And I strongly dislike another hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of kind of core blimey governor cockney geezerage going on.
This is my home. Get out now. No, this is not your house. Now, what's your name? My name is Bill Wilkins, and I'm 72 years old.
What do you make of that voice?
Some of it's quite funny. There's a couple of jokes that they've managed to, I imagine the British actors said, no, we can't do it like that. We'll do it like this and it'll work. And you can feel that it's the actors doing it rather than the script.
Yeah. I mean, it is, of course, you know, they've taken the formula from the first one, even to the extent where they have the opening scene that's a completely different case, which is the Amityville case. Yeah. And then we go to something new, but it's I suppose it's the classic sequel thing of same again, but more, you know, more monsters, more ghosts.
And it's a shame because, again, with the smart, you know, at the end of The Conjuring, they said, there's a case we should look up in Long Island.
Yes.
And it's the Amityville horror. I mean, of all the cases in all the world, everyone knows Amityville.
Yeah.
But one sidesteps it. He skips it. He does show it in a way with her sort of running around shooting that gun, which incidentally is a really horrible...
Yeah, creepy.
Horrible and also very gory and very violent.
Yes.
Which, again, felt slightly against what the original Conjuring had actually done.
Absolutely, yeah.
You have her wandering around pretending to shoot all these people, the kids in their beds, which was really happened.
There's just a lot more, isn't there? Everything's turned up to 11. I mean, even when I went to see it, I went to the press screening of it, and it was like, you didn't just go to watch it. You had to go through, it was at Waterloo Vaults, and you had to go through a kind of ghost walk.
Oh, no.
Where you went through all these kind of dark tunnels, and people jumped out on you, and someone was dressed as the nun, and you had all these
I think I missed
different
that
things.
screening.
Yeah,
I think I was invited, and I said, can I just see it normally? And thankfully, I think I saw it normally, because I couldn't have done... I hate that.
Yeah, it's awful. And of course, you know, being a press event, they film the whole thing. So then, at the end of it, it gets put on Twitter and Facebook, and they tag you in it. These like night vision footage of you being terrified, you know, by all these various rooms you walk through.
Funnily enough, that was how I first saw Wreck. It was at Glasgow Fright Fest years ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Years ago, before it was released. They hadn't released it, but Sky did a night vision recording, and we had to basically sign our sort of life away for how Wreck would look. And obviously they waited for that found footage moment,
of course,
in the attic where everyone was going insane. But we'd never seen anything quite like Wreck before. Found footage, obviously, but nothing.
Wreck is the I'd say probably my favourite found footage film.
Wreck is visceral and oh god. And I had someone film me watching that. And now I think about it, I'm like, I really hope that's not sitting somewhere of me just eyes wide.
Yeah.
The worst possible angle.
It's like a marketing dream, though, isn't it? If they film a whole bunch of people screaming and, shrieking and all that kind of thing. Yeah, it's perfect. So, yeah, we had to do all that. And then they absolutely plied us with alcohol. I mean, there was so much alcohol that I think basically we got given a bottle of wine and a glass each as we went in. So again, I was like, this is strange. And again, so we ended up, it was a press screening, and yet it was this absolute mental atmosphere of people laughing. Everyone was drunk. People were, I'm sure at points, just laughing at it, but also shrieking. And it was so funny because I thought they've even managed to get a kind of raucous audience out of a press screening. You know, it's hilarious.
Which would normally would sit quite...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wouldn't make a sound, would they? Yeah. So
I think someone did laugh when we were watching The Conjuring, which was The Nun.
Yes.
Now, you either embrace The Nun
or
you do not.
Yes.
And I'm actually a convert on The Nun. When I first saw, the introduction of it is, again, almost too comedic, where she comes in, "Morning, dear," and he said, "Oh, I can't sleep, so I got up and drew this." And then you have this shot of the nun, this acrylic painting. He's like, "Oh, I just woke up and
threw it together.
I just did that this morning while you were, still asleep." And there's the humor of that, and you're like, "Oh no, you've gone too far." But then I felt like, although it is intrinsically not scary, he's again gone with the real makeup and the real thing. So it's not CGI; it is a real person. And suddenly it becomes quite menacing. The longer you look at it, the scarier is it Varrock gets. And I think there's the scene where she's gone into the office and she's creeping around the walls, and that she's going to go behind the picture, but the hands come around behind, and there is fear there. You're going, this is a bit silly, but at the same time, you're still afraid.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And isn't there a moment when... Now, it's all a bit hazy because I had a bottle of wine when watching it, but isn't there a moment when she's kind of stood in the corridor and she sees the nun stood at the end of the hallway?
Yeah.
That, I remember, scared me. I was like... Because first of all, you see her and she's looking at it, and it's all very much like the fear on her face before they reveal what she's looking at. So it kind of builds and builds.
Honey? What's wrong? Mom? Who's that? Go back.
And she's this kind of personification of her losing Ed, which is interesting because that, again, is something that if they'd done something slightly cleverer with, it would have felt a bit better.
Exactly, yeah.
Because her losing him, being in the business of exercising demons, these are daily risks. So anything more concentrating on that instead of, CGI things and corridors and crooked men, which that's apparently is having its own movie.
Of course it is, but this is the thing, isn't it? That is another thing that was wrong with that second one, is that suddenly it felt like, right, now we know how much money this is going to make. We're setting up all these other...
That was the Justice League moment.
It was the USB stick, wasn't it?
But only him, because I didn't mind the nun. Bringing in that and finding out that the nun is getting her own movie, that's interesting because it also ties into Annabelle Creation.
Yes.
And there is a moment in Annabelle Creation where it's just a throwaway line, but everyone in the cinema that has seen knows what the nun is goes, oh.
And that's great. I mean, I do love that about it, good for them. And there's one of the things about the Saw franchise, isn't it, that it's so like, oh my god, you get to like Saw 6 and suddenly there's a flashback to something in Saw 2 and it reveals something new and they all tie together, and he's good at that kind of thing. And I think that's great. It's just, again, it's like, my God, when you just take a step back and look at The Conjuring 2 and you go, right, you've got the Amityville story, you've got the Enfield story, you've got the nun, you've got the dolls, you've got the slim man. Yeah, it's
no wonder.
Crazy amount.
Felt like a hot mess.
Yes.
There's no wonder. There's literally no wonder. It's like the Justice League horror equivalent.
It
which
kind
is,
of is.
Which is a shame because in there are so many bits of things and introductions to things.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how we're going to feel about the nun, but at the same time, I love Thaisa Farmiga.
Yes.
She's amazing.
We saw, as if you've seen it, I don't know if it's out there yet, but we got shown at Fright Fest an exclusive clip, and it looked brilliant. It looked like The Witch.
Yeah.
So it's like set in the kind of olden days. You know, you've got, what's her name, Tamissa Farmiga, is it?
I never quite know.
Yeah,
it.
but it's
I
Vera
like her a
Farmiga's
lot.
sister.
Yes. I'm
Yeah,
never
I don't
entirely
know.
sure about
Yeah.
the fart. I can never confirm that, but
She's very good.
She is, and she's amazing in American Horror Story.
She is. Final
and
Girls. She's good in lots of
Final Girls. That's
underrated.
a great movie.
Yeah, so good.
I cried at that movie.
Yes.
I laughed. I cried. She's
Really
so
good.
good. She has
Really
great
moving.
boots in it. I like her boots.
She's very good. And yeah, this looks, at least from a clip we saw, like it's going to be a real stripped down, you know, set in the old days, people wandering around with kind of lanterns and candles in these like little kind of country farmhouses, you know, convents, crucifixes, all this kind of thing where you just think, yeah, this is going to be scary, this is going to be good, you know. I think maybe, hopefully, he kind of learnt maybe from the Conjuring 2 that he needs to strip it back again.
I also think it's giving a chance to other fresher horror directors.
Yes.
You know, giving Annabelle Creation to David F. Sandberg. I don't think...
Perfect.
Probably he wouldn't have wanted... On paper, I couldn't imagine him saying, oh, great, part of the Conjuring universe. But I think there's probably a lot of sway that they have in that, because Juan is part of the executive production process, where he can go, no, you can kind of do what you want.
Yeah.
It's almost like, in a good way, collecting this great, brilliant, talented pool of horror directors and getting them to produce the kind of horror movies that they want, because that doesn't, you know, The Nun doesn't sound traditional Juan.
No, it doesn't. And that's what's really nice about it. And like, I suppose compared to, you know, something like the Star Wars or Marvel or DC, where they've put so much money into this that they're too scared to ever go wrong. They can't risk anything. I mean,
they've made
they
a lot
have
of,
gone wrong.
they've gone very wrong. Except Wonder Woman. We will always have Wonder Woman.
Absolutely. But, you know, they were. It's like when you look at all of the like craziness with Star Wars directors and how many get kicked off and replaced by safer people like JJ and, you
the
know,
Han
all that.
Solo situation.
Yeah,
Ron Howard must save the day. It's like,
Yeah.
none of this would happen in horror.
No, and that's the thing. I think because there's probably, you know, what would it be, about 100th of the budget probably. You know, they're working on that kind of more Blumhousey model of like a couple of mil for the whole thing, and it must just give. I reckon they must give them a bit more leeway in that regard as well. It's not as much of a risk.
There isn't really, and also it's quite interesting in the wider cinematic universe of all things. We are working in universes now.
Yes.
We work in Marvel.
Yeah.
We work in Star Wars. You know, they've just said that we'll have a new Star Wars films every year for the next 10.
Yeah.
That's just what we're going to have.
That's just going to happen.
That's just going to be the thing. And we're living in a world of less risk, and I'd rather at least horror, even if it's going to have these universes, which I imagine within the horror community there's probably a lot of, well, it's not a Wan film so we can't make it. I imagine it causes its own problems. But in terms of what we can experience, I'm excited to see these different things. And hey, maybe even the Crooked Man movie, he might have been crammed in there, but
it might work as its own film.
It is its own intrinsic thing, where
Absolutely.
if it has an origin story and it has the right set of characters to haunt, I can almost, you know, we're assuming positive intent here, but, you know, that could be a great movie.
Yeah.
You know, I remember, do you remember there was, oh God, this is going back a long time. Do you remember there was those alcoholic things called Metz?
Yeah, Metz. Oh,
Yeah.
I know what you're going to talk about. The
And there was
Judder Man.
The Judder Man.
Yes,
That's
absolutely
that's
amazing.
who the Crooked Man is.
Yeah.
And it was this, you know, beware the Judder Man at night.
Yeah.
I had nightmares about the Judder Man.
Oh, we all did.
Because those ads were horrific. I didn't
So
really
good.
care for the alcopop, but
No, but the
when-
advert,
yeah.
the advert you can still watch on YouTube, by the way,
Yeah.
and it is just the best advert of all time.
It's so good.
Beware the Judder Man, my dear, when the moon is fat. Sharp of tongue and spindle-limbed he is, and cunning. With sweetened talk of schnapps and Metz and the deliciousness of judders.
It's the kind of thing that all horror fans would be like, remember that advert?
Yeah,
It was the
yeah.
best. But yeah, it's things like that. I think he is that character. Make that feature film. Make the
Absolutely.
Judder Man the movie. I watched the Judder Man the movie. Good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, someone
Yeah.
needs to do that.
Yeah, it's just keeping that balance, isn't it, of kind of studios wanting to go, you know, set this up and set that up and hint at that and put that in and put that in, and just letting these filmmakers do what they need to do. And yeah, like you say, it's an amazing opportunity. It's an amazing vessel for like all these new horror filmmakers to get involved in something, which is great.
We're
yeah.
having so much, what we were talking about it earlier. Like,
Yeah.
This year for horror
Oh my God,
has been amazing.
unbelievable.
And would we have this if The Conjuring hadn't been successful.
No, I don't think we would have. I think that is what launched everything, just because it made so much money, let's be honest, but also because it's turned the sort of tide, hasn't it?
It's knowing that horror has an audience. I think finally proving that people are going to the cinema less. People are watching Netflix. People are binging Netflix.
Yeah.
Cinemas are probably worried. If we can have more of these experiences together.
It's about the experience as well with these films, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you can put people into a cinema and they will have fun and they won't mind paying X amount to go in when that's an entire month and a bit of Netflix.
Yeah.
That's the horror model still works. Meanwhile, as Netflix start to grow, it's more, I've been watching horror like 1922 and Gerald's Game. All these things are Netflix originals. And you're going, these would be in cinemas or elsewhere. We're not getting them in cinemas. So big horror experiences pave the way for more horror and better things, I
Absolutely. Guess. Yeah. Well, there you go. I was kind of like on the fence about The Conjuring, but I think you've kind of convinced me, actually. Which is,
Well, that's good.
I mean... James Wan, say what you want about him, he knows what he's doing. He knows horror, he knows the genre, doesn't he? That's the thing. And he loves the genre as well. You can tell he's just like bathing in it. He relishes every minute of it with these movies.
He needs to stop making Aquaman and go and
really
make more horror again.
Yeah, he really does.
I hate it when he's like, I'm just going to make a Fast and Furious. Don't do that.
Don't you dare.
Get back in. Get back in. Have some more nightmares.
Yes.
Write another script and scare me. Do it now. I don't want any of your Aquaman. I just don't want it.
Absolutely.
I mean, maybe it'll be amazing, but... come back to horror.
Yeah,
now.
Come on. Thank you so much for joining me, Louise. Where can people kind of find you, on social media and that kind of thing, or stuff you've written?
They can find me on Twitter. I am shiny_demon, because when I was 17, I liked Tenacious D and I've never escaped it.
Amazing.
And you can also find all my words on Games Radar, and you'll sometimes find me writing in Horrorville and SFX.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to my guest, once again, the brilliant Louise Blain. Don't forget, if you want to find Louise anywhere else, find what she writes or what she contributes for, check out her Twitter. All of her details will be listed in this week's show notes. So, what did you think of this week's episode? And what's your take on James Wan movies and the ever-expanding cinematic universe of The Conjuring? Please do get in touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, that's @evolutionpod, or on Facebook, that's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. And if you want to talk about this week's episode or horror movies with other listeners, join the discussion group. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group that can be found on Facebook. Don't forget, you can find us on all major podcast platforms. And if you do get a chance, if you're an iTunes user, please do drop us a little rating or review, preferably a 5-star one, on iTunes. And if you do, I will give you a special shout out on the podcast next week. So, speaking of next week, what have we got left to discuss? Well, the problem with supernatural ghost movies is that there are so damn many of them. And in fact, if I wanted to do every single great ghost movie in depth, I would probably be doing this one series for about 2 years. So, next week is going to be our chance to plug some of the gaps and talk about not just 1 or 2, but several, 10 in fact, fantastic, underrated ghost movies that have maybe gone slightly under the radar, maybe didn't warrant an entire episode worth of discussion, but are still worth dropping into conversation. So to join me to discuss all these movies next week, it's the perfect guest for this kind of a week, actually, because it's the man who has seen, I think, probably every single movie ever made. If you follow him on Letterboxd, you'll know just how many movies it is he manages to watch, and it's quite an intimidating amount. Next week, I'm going to be joined by the brilliant Brad Hanson. He's been on the podcast before, discussing late 80s and early 90s slashers with me last series, and I've got him back again. I've dragged him out of a dark cinema, locked him in a cupboard, and forced him to podcast with me for a couple of hours. So Brad will be listing his picks for the 10 best ghost movies from the last 25 years, ones that we haven't discussed on the podcast already. This will be a spoiler-free discussion. We won't be going into anything in depth. It will just be a list of recommendations. Can't wait to get stuck into that conversation. So join me next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.